All right, welcome everyone to tonight's presentation with Lori Tsugawa Whaley, and let the samurai be your guide. Take it away, Lori.
I want to welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. This is one of my favorite subjects in the whole book is Tsugihara because he was Chuni Tsugihara was a diplomat from Japan to Lithuania, and he had nothing to gain and everything to lose by being a courageous man. Well, we'll start off with his life. He was born on January 1st, 1900, quite an auspicious day in Japan, and it was a cold day, and he was one of six children. There are five boys and one girl. He was born the second son, and next one wanted him to be a doctor. However, he did not like the sight of blood. He was more leaning towards, actually, his mother was samurai, towards the arts, language, and travel. He wanted to do all of that. So what he did is he went down to Korea to a prestigious medical school to take the entrance exam. And when he went down there, the only thing that he did was write his name, which meant I was here, but I didn't finish the test. So at that time, his father's obligations to him ended. There's a phrase in Japanese called oya no oya koko, and that's how in the Japanese society everything is through generations, and that would be to be obedient to your father. Well, he knew at that time that being a doctor was not part of the plans for his life. So he had to follow his heart and make a decision. Do I do what my father said, or do I follow my heart? Well, he decided that he had to follow his heart because he could have been a doctor and known everything, but perhaps hated it. So he did not follow his father's wishes. And at that time in history and being samurai, that was quite daring for him to do, but he had to do the right thing. And for him, doing the right thing was not to be a doctor. There's an early picture that you see up of the family, the mother. And this is Tsugihara, the second son. Let's see.
Do you want me to do the next slide?
Yes, please. And another picture a couple years after.
Which one is he?
Yeah, this is fine. The Tsugihara family in 1920 was taken soon after he was drafted into the army. He was the second son, standing in the middle in uniform, this person.
Mhm.
So he had one, two, three, four other brothers and a sister. Again, another picture of him. So what he did once he got into college, you probably read that in the notes, he was able to apply for a scholarship. And this scholarship was took him to Russia to learn Russian language. And Tsugihara was quite a linguist. Many people have problems with one language and or two, but he spoke about five language, I believe. He spoke Russian and Japanese, English. I forget how many other, but he was able to speak a lot of languages. So he's a very good candidate to be an ambassador to work in the foreign fields. And here he's at his desk. And this test that he took in order to get the scholarship, people usually study about 2 years in order to pass the exam. But he didn't have 2 years, he only had a few months, and he devised a plan. And the plan was written into a book about how to study. It's called A Snowy Day in Harbin. This next slide I think is interesting. This is after he meets his wife, or soon to be wife. He was at a department store and she was behind the counter, and they had quite a conversation. And he came back, he says, "Oh, I'll come back for my tie." And so when he comes back, he has another conversation with her, and then the friendship goes into uh, a relationship. And then he told her that she would be an excellent diplomat's wife. And she goes, oh, you think so? And so they were married. He was about 12 or 13 years older than his wife, but they had a marriage of about 50 years, and she was by his side through all the travels and everywhere he went. You can go to the next one. Can anybody read that one? This one right here?
The bottom or the
Yeah,
middle?
the sign. Can anyone read that?
No.
It says, no Jews allowed. And that was right there. So after they got married, they went to Europe and they had a wonderful life, and then came to Kaunas. And really, he was sent to Kaunas, Lithuania as a spy, but he was the vice consul. And so they were getting a taste of what was going on, and they didn't like a lot of what they saw. Let's just put it that way. And this is the family. This is Tsugihara, Mrs. Tsugihara. And that guard right there is kind of scary looking. And then her sister traveled with them to help take care of the children, because they had many obligations and would go to different functions and events, and they lived quite a life. And she usually dressed up in her kimono when they went to state affairs, anything having to do with the government. She usually dressed that way. Oh, I'm sorry, could you go back to that last one?
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't mention is when the situation was brought before them, they learned about the Polish and actually the Jews in Europe, and they were quite concerned. They had the power to do things, write visas. However, the government of Japan said no. He asked them 3 times, and every time they said no. So he thought about it, and he thought, what should I do? And so I would like to read to you what he wrote later in life. It's too long to memorize. It says, you want to know about my motivation, don't you? Well, it's a kind of sentiments anyone would have had when he actually sees refugees face to face, begging with tears in their eyes. He just cannot help but sympathize with them. Among the refugees were the elderly and women. They were so desperate that they went so far as to kiss my shoes. Yes, I actually witnessed such scenes with my own eyes. Also, I felt at that time that the Japanese government did not have any uniform opinion in Tokyo. Some Japanese military leaders were just scared because of the pressure from the Nazis, while other officials in the Home Ministry were simply ambivalent. People in Tokyo were not united. I felt it silly to deal with them. So I made up my mind not to wait for their reply. I knew that somebody would surely complain about me in the future, but I myself thought this would be the right thing to do. There's nothing wrong with saving people's lives. In the spirit of humanity, philanthropy, neighborly friendship, with this spirit, I ventured to do what I did, confronting this most difficult situation. And because of this reason, I went ahead with redoubled courage. The reason I wanted to show this slide is because he did not act alone. He asked his family, what should I do? And he always taught his family, and this is the way he lived, is put yourself in their shoes. And so the children did. And the children said, if you can see below, if you don't help them, they're going to die. And so they understood that this was a serious situation. And they said, you have to save the lives of those people out there. You just have to. So he went ahead, even though the government of Japan said no. And so from the end of July into the early part of September, he wrote visas tirelessly every day, about 18 hours a day. And at the end of the day, his hands would be so cramped that his wife would have to massage them. he did not want her to be doing any of the stamping, anything having to do with the visas, transit visas, because he knew that she could be implicated. They were taking a big risk. This could be their lives. This could be their livelihood. They didn't know, but they were to find out that it was not to their advantage to do it. Even though it was legal to just send them away, that's fine. It was legal at that time to be annihilating the Jewish people, but it wasn't moral. So that's the point I would like to get across, is that many times in our lives, something may be fine and legal, but is it moral? A good case in point is cigarettes. They're legal, but do they help? Do they help people? And I'd have to say, no, cigarettes do not help people. I haven't found anyone that can come up with a benefit of smoking cigarettes. I don't want to talk about that too much, but a lot of times in your lives, you might find that something might be legal, but you take the high road, the moral road. You can go to the next slide. So every day from the end of July, they came to the doorsteps of the consulate's office because they knew that they might be able to get transit visas to go to other parts of the world to escape the annihilation. And he was their only hope. So they would come to his doorstep and he just didn't know what to do. So he asked for 5 men to come and represent the people and to do the negotiations and the conversations. And so they chose 5 people that would be able to speak English as well as their own Polish language. So the 5 people met with Tsugihara, and he decided that he was going to write the transit visas. And a transit visa could also include a family. So he did not have to write one for each member of the family. In that short period of time, he wrote over 2,000 visas, saving over 6,000 lives. And one visa that he wrote was for the Mir Yeshiva. That's a Jewish religious school. And the rabbi came to him and wanted to know, could you do that for us? And he says, come back in a few days and I'll see what I can do. So he returned, and the visa included every single one of the students and teachers, faculty or rabbis, religious teacher. And it was the only yeshiva in the whole, in the Jewish history that was saved during the World War II. Other ones, there were parts of the yeshiva, part of the students, part of the rabbis, some staff, but this was the only one that was saved in its entirety. So throughout the years, they continue to have reunions with Tsugihara and they call them Tsugihara survivors, and people that had a visa were very, very fortunate because they were only about 5 to 10% of what they could have saved. So this picture to me is really moving. And if you can imagine, the children would see the young children and the mothers holding their babies. It would be a difficult decision. It would be hard to shut the door on them, because if those visas were not written, they would face annihilation, and most of them did. So we can go to the next slide. So once the government of Japan said, immediately, you need to cease your activities and get on the train because we're closing the office. And he was threatened by the Lithuanian government, and the Japanese government says, you need to stop. But he said he ignored them and continued to write the visas because he knew that he was saving lives. And here you can see the 2 young boys. And some stories say that he was stamping his consulate stamp and throwing it out the window, and he didn't know for many, many years whether or not people were able to to obtain freedom. So he went to Berlin, and the family was inside. Let me go to the next one. Well, this is a nice photo. It's a happy photo because these people were fortunate to leave Kobe to go to Canada. And some people were scattered all over. But they were some of the more fortunate people that were able to obtain the visas and then have a way to escape. Because it's one thing to have a visa. It's another thing to know where to go, how to go. And some of them went to Curaçao, it's a Dutch colony. And from there, they went to other parts of the world, wherever people would take them. And this is a very sobering photograph. It was taken before the mass execution of all the people in this photograph. So all of these people didn't make it. You can go to the next one. And here you see a list. And he kept very good records. And they say there's even more than what was recorded because some were just given to people as they were leaving. And I've actually heard about them. This photograph was taken in the Tsugihara Memorial Hall in Yaotsu, Japan. It's an actual transit visa that he wrote. So it's very special. So some of them received their visa and went to Kobe. And down below is the Joint Distribution Committee, an organization based in the United States with a mission to help Jews escape from Europe safely. And this photograph shows his warm, and he's a very charismatic person, very articulate, very likable, just a perfect person to be a diplomat. And it shows how he negotiated in order to have the best results, not only for this situation, but any situation he came upon as a diplomat. He was always negotiating and always trying to make the best decisions, but he knew it took cooperation. So this is just a picture. And then after he was released from his duties, he was terminated. He had a hard time finding a position, any type of position that would actually feed a family. So he had to go elsewhere in order to be able to feed his family. I don't know what the term is in Japan, but in the United States, it would be called blacklisted. And he was unable to do anything more in the foreign, being a foreign ambassador, any type of government job, he was blacklisted and had a hard time finding a position in Japan. So he had to go elsewhere in order to support his family, which was very sad. And then all these years, he did not know whether or not anybody was able to go to safety. He just was hoping, assuming, and the whole time from the World War II until here in 1969, the government of Japan was just telling people, oh, we don't know where he is. They would not reveal any information about him because at that time it was shameful for Tsugihara because he disobeyed his government. But he wanted to do the right thing. And for him, he felt the right thing was to save the lives of Jewish people, even though he was risking his own life. this Mr. Nishri right here, no, it wasn't Mr. Nishri, I'm sorry. He met with Zorak Warhavtig, a rabbi from Lithuania. And he was one of the 5 people that spoke with Tsugihara in order to receive their visas. And he was so happy because he did not know whether or not any of those visas went through. He didn't know because he had no contact with those people, and he was in other parts of the world. And back then, they didn't receive news or information like we receive it now instantaneously. But this was a very, very emotional, happy day for him because he all those years he thought that he didn't know whether or not all that work he did made a difference. So we can see how just one person's life can make a difference. This was 45 years after he signed the visas. And I read to you what he said about they were human beings and they needed help. But you can see on his countenance, I can, that doesn't look like a very, very happy man. And he wasn't. His grandchildren talk about how he was very quiet and very, very much inward. He was taking it all inside and not sharing much about what happened because it's something that couldn't be shared at that time. It wasn't a good thing that he did in the eyes of people, but in the eyes of the Jewish people that he was able to help and save, it meant the world to them. It was their life. And it was, many people this day say, if it wasn't for Tsugihara, I wouldn't be here. So people have been tracked down in New York and Florida, and they've had reunions. And the son that was his youngest son is carrying on his legacy. And so this year, 2020, they call it this Chiyuni Tsugihara year. And unfortunately, because of COVID, not much could be done as in the way of traveling to Lithuania, but they still celebrated within the country because here was one person who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And he did it because he was a humanitarian. He did it out of the goodness of his heart and wanted to save as many Jews' lives as he could. And so sometimes we just wonder, what good does our life do? And then this is his wife, which is a beautiful woman, and said, we understood that both the Japanese and German governments disagreed with our ideas, but we went ahead anyhow. And so he was a maverick. Tsugihara was a maverick, and he didn't care whether or not it was legal. He knew that it was the right thing to do. There's 7 principles in the Code of Bushido: courage, integrity, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. So those 7 words, and it can be summed up into do the right thing all the time. Do the right thing all the time. And that's 7 words. Do the right thing all the time. And I'm showing this visa again because I would like you to think about Tsugihara and the difference that he made. And you may think, what can one person do? That ripple effect. One person can mean a lot and does mean a lot. Maybe that we won't be saving lives of Jewish people, but the one thing that we do, we can make a difference in the world. This was at the Hill of Humanity. And he was honored, unfortunately, posthumously. And the museum was not in the birthplace of Mino City, but close. It was a beautiful place because it was up on a hill, and he was honored this way. And during the time that he was alive, he didn't realize how many people were affected by his visas. The government of Israel honored him in 1984 by giving him a an honor called Righteous Among the Nations, and it's given to Gentiles that risked their lives saving Jewish people. He wasn't the only one. There are many people that have been of stories of people like a gentleman in England and a nurse in that lived actually in the United States. And they all received this award, but Tsugihara was the first Asian to receive the award and the only Japanese person to receive this award. So I did not put that in the slides. I'm sorry I didn't do it, but I'll show you the, this is, can you see that?
A little bit.
A little bit. Is that better? I forgot to put, I apologize. I forgot to put it on a slide, but it's called Diploma of Honor. And his nickname was Sempo Tsugihara. And he went by Sempo because he did not want to be, shall we say, discovered. And it was given in Jerusalem on the 29th of November, 1984. And at that time, he was not well enough and strong enough to travel to Israel. So his wife and the youngest son, Nobuki, went to Israel. And they wanted to honor him and do something. He did not want money. He wouldn't take money for what he did, but he said, you can take care of if you would, take care of my son. So the son was educated by the government of Israel in Jerusalem. And he graduated from there, from the university. And he went on and married an Israeli woman, and they now live in Belgium. He has something to do with trading diamonds, I believe is what he does. Sells and trades diamonds. But he's a very nice person, and I'm so glad. And I just felt like after I had contact with him that my book is finished. Oops. Are we on? Can we say anything? Oh yeah, great. So that is the story of Chunin Tsugihara, and his wife actually lived quite a while longer. She was younger than him. She lived into her 90s. And I think it was about 10 years ago she passed away. But many people, because they did not have money, someone asked her, what would you like to do? And she said, I'd like to go to Hawaii. And so a group of people here in the United States funded her trip to go to Hawaii because they pretty much died or were living the lives of paupers. They had no money, and he didn't have a good career after he left the diplomacy. He wasn't able to find employment at that time. There weren't opportunities then like there are now. Like now, there are all kinds of opportunities because of the internet. We can be connected. We can be connected here on Zoom. We have people from different parts of the country here, and it's all because of technology. And it's helpful if you know how to run it. But I'm learning, right, Bettina? I'm learning. I have my microphone, and just learning how to navigate in this virtual world. But his life was what inspired me to write the book. I started off with his life, and the book coach says, well, why don't you write a whole book about him? I said, well, because other people have, and I don't want to. His wife wrote a book, and the woman that is head of the Tsugihara Foundation wrote a book. And I thought, well, I don't want to write a book. I just want to include him. And he was what I felt exemplified courage, because he didn't go into it blindly. He weighed, he just counted the costs it was tremendous costs. They were even in prison for 18 months before they came to before they came back to Japan. And then coming back to Japan and finds out that he no longer has a career with doing what he loved to do the most, and that was to be a diplomat. And he was an excellent diplomat because most people cannot speak 4 or 5 languages, and he did. He just had this ability to speak in different languages. So that is about what I have for you today about Tsugihara. I could go on and on about his life, but I just wanted to bring that, his life, and share it because to me, it's just inspiring. He's an unsung hero. He did not gain, he did not earn, he didn't get money or anything. And a lot of the people that he gave visas to did not have the money either. So he figured out a way that they could leave without having the money that was necessary. So he worked, shall we say, he worked around the system. He worked with different diplomats and different people from other countries so that the Jewish people would have that successful exit. So now I would like to open it up and hear your comments about what you thought about his life. And I wrote some questions. One of the quotes was, "In a moment of decision, the best thing to do is the right thing to do." And that was Theodore Roosevelt. And then in the back it says, "If you save the life of one person, it is if you saved the entire world." And that's the Talmud. So at this time, I'll open it up, and I would like to hear your comments about Tsugihara and what you learned and how it could perhaps help you in your own life making decisions. Yes, to you.
I popped in a little late, sorry, but I'm so glad I was able to catch it when you began, because what an inspiring man. A lot of what you shared reminds me of the story of Schindler and how many people he saved. And the correlation, my family comes from Estonia, which is just north of Lithuania.
Oh.
And like what was happening to the Jews was also happening to the Estonians, but they were rerouted to Siberia. I lost my uncle up there, my father's brother. He was in his 20s, early 20s, and they took him to Siberia and no one ever saw him again.
Mm.
I know that, and there's even in Estonia, there's a memorial for the Jewish Estonians that were also
Annihilated.
Yeah. So, there's a train that took a bunch of them to Siberia. So to hear that it was also something that was happening, and is it Tsugihara? Able to save these lives, and be willing to risk everything, and that was something that his son said, you have to. It was like out of the mouths of babes, you have to. The value of a life. Mm-hmm. I'm incredibly honored to hear your story. I'm so glad you shared this with us because it just gives it another dimension. I hear stuff from my family and my family heritage, but to see how it spans out to, even what was going on in Japan, that's huge. I'm really glad you shared that.
Thank you. And especially since he risked everything.
He did.
No, yeah.
Thank you. Rosie, Teresa, any thoughts?
Yeah, it sounds like he saved over 6,000 lives. Is that what it was? And then you think of all their kids and their kids. It's just amazing. Even just saving one life, what that impact would have. Yeah, that's amazing.
But I heard that when you save one person, you save the 3 generations behind and also the 3 generations forward. So you can see, if he saved 6,000 people, can you imagine the amount of people that came out of those 6,000. I mean, Rosie, that's crazy, right?
They say over 100,000.
Yeah.
Mm.
Did you want to share, Teresa?
I was just going to say that, it's just inspiring, the courage that it took for him to do the right thing, and, we have little things that we need courage for, and to hear his story and the profound impact that he had and the risk that he took, just makes you think about having the courage to do the little things that present just, kindness and doing the right thing. Thank you for sharing. It's a very inspiring story.
Isn't it? Well, thank you for being here. I love the story.
I'm pretty certain that I'll never be tasked with
Just people.
the big opportunity to be courageous in that level. And I hope that in the manner in which I've lived my life that I have done on a much smaller scale, done the right thing, but I hope that those kinds of circumstances will never be a part of our future of humanity, and that we can live out our lives in relative peace, not having to make those kind of big decisions. I mean, in some cases, I would have to say it wouldn't have even been a decision, except that he had to check in with his family because he was putting them at risk, but if he was himself, all by himself, he probably would have just automatically, it sounds like, made the right choice. And I know I certainly would, and I'm sure everybody sitting here would. But when you've got family and you've got other people's lives to consider, that's a whole nother story.
It is.
Look, we got a little one in here. How beautiful.
The reason I was on mute and off video because they were kind of in and out, a little noisy.
A little sleepy too.
You've got a 2-year-old be bashful on video. She almost didn't want to come around because she saw the faces.
What a cutie.
Did you want to share, John?
Sure. One thing that really resonated with me that you said a couple times was that Tsugihara is really an unsung hero.
Yes.
You actually introduced me to him. I haven't heard of him before your book talk and now this series. And I feel like he deserves to be more well known. And I really wish history classes would talk about him because I feel like he did have such an impact. And I think we could learn a lot from his actions. So I just really hope that happens in the future, that it's more, that his story is more widely spread. And also, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I'm really grateful you taught us so much about him, but you also mentioned that his wife also wrote a book. I was wondering if I could have the title, just so I can read that as well.
His
If
title?
you know.
The book she wrote?
Yeah.
Oh, I can go get it. I can go get it right real quick. There's
Thank
actually
you.
2 books, and one was by the woman that has head of the Tsugihara Foundation in San Francisco kind of area. And I preferred her book more. Just a
Okay.
second, I'll go get it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Great. See, now that's the way to handle it. But right now we're gonna just get John his answer.
Yes, and I have one more book I want to share that's out in the living room.
I'm curious, did anyone else hear about him other than through
Until I met
Lori?
Lori, I had no idea who she was talking about. And Schindler's the main character that I've ever heard about, but that's only one of many, many people. There were lots of folks that were courageous and heroes.
I love I don't know if any of you have heard about the one story of a nurse whose name was Irene. And she used to take babies and put them in wagons or hide them and take them across town to safety.
I remember. I heard those stories.
Yes. Okay, this one is, and I'll put it in the chat, called Visas for Life. And that was by Yukiko Tsugihara. I liked her book a lot. And here she shows, they show people that were survivors in here like that. People that actually survived. And they have reunions. And so that's Visas for Life. So I'll put that in the chat. The other one is called The Gift of Life. And this is by Anne Akabori. You might even be able to find it on Amazon. I'm not sure.
I'll look. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the other ones I wanted to show you are, this one is called Passage to Freedom, the Tsugihara story. And it was written by Ken Mochizuki. And he writes children's books, historical children's books. Can you see that?
Mhm.
And my granddaughter wanted me to purchase that one for her. And the last one is called, I think, is Poopy's Story. Is my German correct? Someone said that's the way it's pronounced. Poopy's Story.
Huh.
And then
What
here,
does poopy mean? Is that just a
I
name?
think Dad's father.
Okay.
And this is a picture of one of the sons that was instrumental in the foundation, and that's Mrs. Tsugihara. So I will put those in the chat, and I'd like to also talk about some of the questions. And one of them says, why is Chuni Tsugihara a good example of courage? If anyone would like to share about that, and I'll be typing in the chat.
He set a moral code.
Pardon?
Why was he considered a hero? Is that what you're saying?
Why is he a good example of courage?
Because no matter what, even what it was like, it didn't matter what the rules were. He went against the rules and honored that a life is more important than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh, everybody froze. My internet went weird and I thought, uh-oh.
Well, he took risks, big risks, but
Mhm.
for something he believed in, he thought he believed was right. He took big risks.
And I
And
think
that's
what's important too is he did the right, he made a choice to do the right action and correct exchange. He wasn't asking for anything.
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason was to save the life.
yeah.
And he didn't judge anybody. He just said, here, go. I mean, he was still wasn't he writing visas at the train station?
That's what I've heard. Mm-hmm. They stayed after they had to leave the consulate's office. Then they went to a hotel, and they said people were coming to him at the hotel asking for him to write visas. If you have a hard time finding these, you can contact me, and if I can find out more about how a couple of years ago, maybe about 3 years ago, the University of Washington, Japanese consulate's office, and the Nisei Vets. Let's see what else. Oh, and the Holocaust Center for Humanity came together, and we had a 3-part series. And one of them was Tsugihara, because his life was so significant. And we rented the slides, and so a lot of those slides are from that presentation. And it was attended by about 400 people. It was so people just loved it. And each one of the events that we had had about 300 to 400 people. And the one that I did was that I worked on, the consul general was leaving Seattle. And so it was kind of a dual thing. We had it for Tsugihara, but it was kind of like a goodbye to the consul general. And he was wonderful. I don't know the new one because he's been in less than half a year, but they have a tenure of about 3 years, and that's it. And then they go on to the next one. So I will write Visas for Life. So I'd really like, if I find information about how to get it, because so what happened is during that event, the woman at the Visas for Life Foundation sent a bunch of books and we sold it for her and sent her the money back. So I don't know if you can get them any other way, but I am going to be ordering the children's book for my granddaughter. Okay, then does anyone else want to comment on that one? Okay, the next one is, who is your courageous hero?
You know, right now for me, it's my mother, because my father died in 2006 and she's home alone and very little human contact. And I think it takes courage to be a senior at 87, to be alone, and to just be holding her own all these years without the love of her life. 50 years they were married.
Wow.
And to have him go sooner, and she's probably going to live till she's 100 at the rate she's going.
My dad.
Your dad?
Yeah, he passed away 3 years ago, but it would be my dad, because during World War II, the Russians and the Germans were bombing his country, and he had to make a choice whether he was going to join the Red Army or the SS Army. And he chose, and this is what's really got me, he chose to join the German Army only because they had an Estonian division. And what happened after was he never actually joined the army at all, even though it looked like he did on paper. He didn't, because what it was his plan with some other young men. They got the paperwork and he doctored up his documents so he could go home to the island where his parents were. And he never reported for duty. Instead, what he did was he buddied up with a few other young men on the island of Iuma, and they took a 21-foot boat with a small motor and a sail, and they went across the Baltic Sea to Sweden. It took them 21 hours to get to Sweden because there was no way they were joining either army.
Oh, wow.
So we are not, I refuse to fight, and the Russians took the country. They occupied the country for over 50 years, and just everything that he did, he honored his family heritage. He brought his family back together. They reunited in Sweden, and then they all made a deal. Dominion Textiles in Canada was making a deal with textile workers in that had come out of Estonia, and they were working at a plant in Sweden. And he had made a deal with Dominion Textiles to come to Canada and work for a year so that they would have passage to freedom. And his family, other than his brother who was taken to Siberia, he went with his parents and his two sisters, and they began a new life in Canada, and they didn't even know the language. They learned Swedish and they had to learn English when they got there. So, there's a lot of tenacity and courage for people. There's so many people who fled to North America and other parts of the world because of the war. So my dad is my inspiration.
Wow, that's a story.
Yeah, I think part of it will be in the book.
Good. It should be.
Yeah, the parts he wrote a little bit of his autobiography, and I'm doing a second book to honor my family.
Oh, good.
Yeah, when you start going back to your roots, you can find so many nuggets. Just like Bettina, your mom is so inspiring what she's doing, and you've mentioned her a little bit before. Mm-hmm. And it comes from, what a wonderful woman. It's so nice that she's still here, that you get to enjoy life with her.
Yeah. She even
My
knows
mom and dad are
how
gone.
to do WhatsApp and FaceTime.
That's okay. FaceTime is good. FaceTime is better than no time, right?
That's right.
Did you want to share, John?
Can I show you a picture of my dad?
Yeah.
Nice.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
I have pictures of him in a shadow box, but this is the one I keep close to my desk. I met my mom in Sweden.
Okay. Do you want to share, John?
Sure. I was trying to think of a more personal example than the one in my head, just because other people are giving more personal examples. I want to go that route, but in the meantime, someone I thought of before, and I think you actually used some in your book for a different virtue, I think for honor, but I was thinking of Saigo
Oh,
Takamori.
Takamori, the
Yes,
last
him.
samurai. Mhm.
Indeed, because you did talk about the last time, right, at the beginning of this series, and it jogged my memory a little bit. So I was thinking about him as the series has gone on regarding courage too, just because he did sort of go against the odds and against the grain of what was happening, and really, and he pretty much knew he was going to lose, but he fought anyway because he knew it was right. So he was sort of my go-to example for courage.
He was courageous because can you imagine? Most people would just say, "Uncle, give up," but it's better to fight to the end, no matter what.
Absolutely.
Rosie.
Yeah.
Did you want to share about who is your courageous hero?
I guess my mom. Yeah, because she put up with a lot, but did a lot for us. You know, I come from a family of alcoholism and abuse. So I think my mom, yeah.
Makes sense.
I want to share with you one of my favorite little paragraphs in the book. I said, most important, Tsugihara was a samurai warrior, yet he did not handle a gun or sword. He brought about change without going to battle. He was strategic yet peaceful, decisive yet compassionate, and determined yet gentle. He was a peaceful warrior, and not every warrior has to be a battlefield hardened soldier to be a true warrior and hero. There are many positive attributes in Chuny Sugihara's life that you can emulate. What did I say? Which ones would you choose? So I wanted to share that because I love that. I love that story, that paragraph, because he was a maverick and way ahead of his time and just so selfless. And he did not want to be Japanese people that way. They don't want to bring attention to themselves. And he definitely did not want to bring attention to himself. And he says, I just did what anyone should do, is to save the lives of Jewish people. So that was one of my favorite stories.
Well, we're right at 5 o'clock.
Oh, we are. Okay.
Start
Well,
on
I want
time.
to thank you for
end
all
on
coming.
time.
Pardon?
I said we start on time and we end on time.
That's right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for having us
Thank you
again.
for having us, Lori.
Sorry I was late.
That's okay. I'm glad you're here. And it'll be in the Facebook, the community. It'll be downloaded there.
Thank you for doing this. It was very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you again, and also share with others, because it's not every section is separate from the other. So if others still want to join us the next sessions, feel free to invite them. Thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.